The Van Buuren Villa is located in Brussels, in a neighborhood built in the 1920s and 1930s. Jules Buissens returned to Belgium in 1903 after an international career in Germany, England, and in Paris, where he worked alongside Edouard André, a great personality of garden and landscape architecture at the turn of the century. He opened a plant nursery in which he experimented with new plants and became the first independent garden architect of the country. He also obtained the position of Inspector of Plantations of Parks and Promenades of the city of Brussels. In 1930, he was one of the 10 co-founders of the Belgian Association of Garden Architects. In 1913, Jules Buissens co-founded a movement called the New Picturesque Garden Movement. He wrote regularly for their magazine from 1913 until 1940. When Buissens began working for Van Buuren in 1927, he was 55 years old and at the height of his career. Upon the deaths of Mr. and Mrs. Van Buuren, and according to their wishes, a foundation was created that would allow the public to visit the property, as of 1975. Over the years, and due to an insufficient rigorous maintenance, the garden had been invaded by parasite vegetation, trees, shrubs. The visual sequences were closed. Very specific plant palettes had disappeared. The structure of the garden was very deteriorated, which motivated the Van Buuren Museum to initiate a restoration, financially supported by the Brussels Capital Region. This work began in 2009 with a historical study. The analysis of the garden was undertaken using several of Jules Buissens' plans, purchase orders of plants, personal photos taken by Van Buuren, regular observations, and by reading many horticultural magazines from the time period, which of course included articles from the quarterly magazine, The New Picturesque Garden. The findings of this study led to interventions in a first phase of slashing and culling of trees, which enabled a better view, and to carry out numerous excavations in the garden. In the second phase, the restoration itself was carried out thanks to all of this essential preliminary work. There is a 4-meter height difference between the villa and the base of the rose garden. This particular situation was remarkably used to advantage by Buissens to develop an extremely varied garden. The successive scenes make use of all opportunities to create sunny and shaded corners, terraces, a hilly prairie, slopes, vertical plains, rockeries, a wetland and stream that we discover on more or less formalized paths. Just like the natural terrain is used to advantage, the living elements of nature such as water are also staged and discreetly integrated into the garden construction. It is the degradation and loss of understanding of this water management that had in parallel caused significant damage throughout the garden. After the restoration of the picturesque and varied water collection network, water is once again gathered in the big reconstructed gutter, and the flower wall, a true vertical garden, now protected from the poor water channeling, has been restored and replanted. After thorough research, the original rose garden has been terraced, and the original rose varieties from the 1910s and 1920s have been replanted. These varieties were widely used by Jules Buissens at the time, but are quite rare to find today. A historic garden also plays the role of gene bank for neglected plants. The New Picturesque Garden abandons uniformed flower beds of annuals that are massively produced by an internationally recognized Belgian horticultural industry, and popularized the use of hardy plants associated in mixed border created by the English wild garden, which it is based on. These associations of hardy plants are also used for the reconstruction of natural scenes, one of the bases of inspiration of the picturesque gardens, such as a cooler or humid environment along the creek banks. Similarly, the scenes of rock garden and alpine plants newly accessible at the time thanks to the development of train and car travel, allowing access to the mountains, had been tested at Buisson's plant nursery and introduced to the garden through flowering rock gardens. In conclusion, because plants are a living heritage and constantly changing, restoring the plantations represented the most subtle point of the entire restoration. The renewed interest of the new picturesque garden for the plant in its natural environment, wild, encourages the creation of the natural picturesque scenes in the garden, and aesthetically it constituted a complete break with the practices of that time. This restoration is also exceptional because it is a private garden, open to the public, and of a smaller size. It must be regarded as a very valuable witness to an aesthetic style of the art of gardens, today completely disappeared.